everyone. My name is Brad Bough. I'm the Lawrence County, Indiana Veteran Service Officer. Co-hosting the event with me today is my good friend and World War II bomber crew member from the B-17s, Lee Hutchinson. Lee, thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here and take part. I know very little about this part of the wars, but this part of the war is very important. And so we're continuing a program that we started last year, well, 10 years ago, really, that we have recorded all the World War II veterans. And the museum has those on record. And so now we're starting with Vietnam on up. And all you guys that signed up for this, we'll get to you.
Today we have two special guests with us, Steve Warren, Vietnam veteran, and Jackie Bartlett, a Vietnam veteran. Jackie's father was my bus driver when I was a kid growing up, so I've known Jackie quite a while. And Steve, I've known him since he was an MC with the Distinguished Young Miss program, is it, Steve?
Yeah, Junior Miss.
Junior Miss,
yeah. Distinguished Young Woman of the Year now and stuff.
Things change as we go along. But welcome, gentlemen. We appreciate you coming, being part of the program today. Steve, you were in the Navy. What type of job did you do while you were in the Navy?
Well, I was a flight engineer, plane captain, flight engineer on the OP-2 Neptune. I enjoyed flying. Our aircraft really wasn't all that much different than the OB-17s that Lee flew in. We were kind of the last of the non-pressurized cabin aircraft, and it was a throwback to the old times. It was actually built at the tail end of World War II as a light-duty bomber, and by the time that plane got completed and ready to go, the war was winding down and ending, and so the Navy converted that aircraft to an anti-submarine warfare aircraft. And by the time they got done adding all the avionics and radar and special equipment on board that aircraft, it became quite heavy. And also the bomb bays that we would have had bombs in, we were equipped with extra fuel tanks that we pulled up into the bomb bays, and that would extend our hours of air time that we could be up patrolling. And the plane got so heavy, though, that they had to add two J-34 jet engines on it outboard to assist in takeoff. But we had two radial 3350 reciprocating propeller-driven engines, and it was a really neat aircraft. We loved that airplane so much, and fun to fly. And I had a crew. Most of the time, I'd have about 8 guys on board. We could accommodate as many as 12 if we had a full avionics crew on and stuff. But our job was basically to fly up and down the West Coast and keeping the Russian subs away from us, because they always like to nose around out there and try to get up and test us a little bit and stuff. And we would search and find them, and we'd drop some sonobuoys around in a triangular pattern and shoot the radar across there, and we would track them. And then we would contact them and tell them they needed to get them up and get out of the area and stuff on it, or we would bring in destroyer or whatever needed to be come in and deal with them. But that's what we was primarily, that was our training mission. And it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed the whole time. We did a lot of cross-country flying and stuff, but mainly up and down the coast.
Well, that was an important job. A lot of people may not realize that these submarines that you were tracking were carrying nuclear missiles, and the farther we can keep them away from our coast, the greater chance we have of evacuating our bases before their nuclear weapons strike. The same thing was happening on the East Coast. We're not so much threatened by Washington, D.C. is not so much threatened by the intercontinental ballistic missiles as it is from the submarines just off the Atlantic coast. Only about a 4 or 5 minute flight time for those missiles. So it's important that we keep them at bay and away from our coast. So that's commendable.
Yeah. Well,
interesting to hear you talk about it.
It was interesting, and we had the nose on the aircraft was all glassed in, so that a bombardier could set out in there to drop bombs and stuff, but we used it as observance. And we had these, on the end of our wing nacelles, we had these multi-million candle power lights that we could just almost turn the water into daylight down when we're searching and stuff. Aircraft had a longer, wider wingspan than it was long. It was purposely made so it could fly low and slow. And we could get down over the water pretty tight, and we could illuminate it pretty good with light. And the observer sitting out in the front, he was trained to recognize the profiles of the subs and identify who they were and what they were. And we had our avionic technicians sitting on the flight deck behind me with all their equipment and radar. And we had guys in the back of the aircraft that they would drop the sonobuoys out. That's where we launched them from, out in the back. The wing spar that went right through the middle of the aircraft only left about 2 foot of space above it to the ceiling of the aircraft. And when you go from front to the back of that thing, you had to slip over and slide down over the wing in the middle of the aircraft and back into the aft station back there and things. And it was a really unique aircraft, a lot of fun to fly.
That sounds a lot like the old Air Force B-36, where you had 6 engines turning and 4 engines burning to get it off the ground, yes. Literally. So when you were on these sub chasers, did you guys carry any type of destructive means, such as depth charges?
Yeah, we had
to be
rockets.
dropped?
We had rockets, wing-launched rockets and things, but our job wasn't primarily to attack the subs. It was primarily to identify them and make contact with them and to discourage them. And that was, I don't know of any case when that didn't work, but if we needed them, we could call in the destroyers and stuff if necessary, to come in and take care of the situation if it was necessary. But there's not a whole lot you can do with rockets and stuff in a submarine. I mean, he's kind of out of harm's way there. The way to get him, you about have to get him from a ship somehow, or something. But we did have armament, and we had some gun turrets on the thing case and stuff like that. The aircraft actually, the Navy never used it in Vietnam. But the United States Army used it some, and was able to, it made a good patrol plane for them as well, but they could mount the Gatling gun in the side of that thing, much like the old C-47 Puffs that was over there. And you could fly slow and low and put a lot of armament into the ground from those things and stuff. But the latter part of my career out there, I spent mostly training Army crews to be able to fly the aircraft in Vietnam. And many of those guys had never flown anything bigger than a Beech 99. And this big aircraft, it was interesting, to teach them how to fly that aircraft. And it was, again, very, very neat deal. I enjoyed it a lot, sure did.
What year did you go in the Navy, Steve?
68.
68, okay. Were you trained by any of the fellows that had actually experienced the Cold War, say 1962, during the Cuban Missile Crisis?
One of my pilot that was assigned to my aircraft, he was a Mustanger. He had come up through the ranks, and he was a lieutenant commander, but he had been an enlisted man, and he had been in Korea, and of course Vietnam and stuff. I mean, he had a lot of experience, and we called him the old man, and stuff. But he was quite a guy. I really enjoyed being around him. He was very knowledgeable and stuff.
And for those in the audience, a lieutenant commander is equal to a major in the Air Force, Army, or the Marine Corps. It's the same rank.
Yeah.
Jackie, how are you today?
I'm doing fine.
Outstanding. When did you join the Army?
I didn't join. I was drafted.
Oh,
I was drafted and went in November '68, I guess it was.
November of 6, so you just missed the Tet Offensive.
Yeah.
But you didn't miss the war itself, did you?
No.
And you're a Purple Heart
I'm
recipient,
a
correct?
Purple Heart recipient. I went to Vietnam, like I said, about in April '69. And I was over there just about 5 months, and I got hurt. And sent me home, sent me to Japan. I was in Japan hospital for about a month or so. Then they sent me to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base Hospital. That's the only place they could get me in close to home. Fort Knox and all them was all full, just like people me. And I was up there a little bit, and they give me a 2-week furlough. Come home, went back up there. Said, "Well, your arms are cooked." I said, "Well, that the cast stuff hit shell or all over me, shrapnel." Said, "How would you like about a 4-month leave or a 4-week leave?" I said, "I'd take it," and done that. So I spent that time for till February, I guess it was. Yeah, February. Then they sent me to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, to finish up my term, and I ended up getting early out to come home help Dad farm, and also met my wife, Kay, down there. So the good Lord had a lot to do with all this I've been through.
I see.
And I also give him the credit for me being able to sit right here, because I was about this much from not being here.
Were you were in the Army?
Pardon?
You were in the Army?
Army,
Army.
25th Infantry Division.
Okay, 25th.
Wolfhounds. Must have been an elite group in there. That's where I ended up, and it was a good group.
What part of Vietnam were you serving in, Jackie?
I was, Cu Chi was where I was most stationed at right in there, and it's above Saigon, 50, 100 miles, something like that. But that's where it's assigned to, Cu Chi. But me, I was out in the boonies 90% of the time.
So what was your job in the Army, Jackie?
My job in the Army was, I started out over as a private PFC, and I was walking point.
So you were infantry.
I was the infantry, and 25th Infantry Division, they don't fool around. And infantry, our job was to go out. We'd be out there, like I said, 90% of the time. They might take us out in helicopters, or might take us out in trucks, dump us out. We'd be on patrol for 2 or 3 days. Then they might bring us in for another day or two, or they might just send us another place, helicopter would be again. So we lived out in the boonies, the jungles, and rice paddies, and it was something. It was something.
But Point was one of the most dangerous jobs you had.
Yes, it was.
You were out front.
Yeah, and then got a little time there, whatever, and I made RTO out of it. And that I was either with the lieutenant or the platoon sergeant, one or the other. Platoon sergeant, I was back here. Lieutenant is up here walking point, because they had to use that radio as much as I did, and everything.
And that's radio, RTO means he was a radio operator
Operator.
for his commissioned officers or his platoon sergeant.
Yeah.
And that makes you a target. 'Cause
Sure
they
does.
want to
Like
take
that.
you out
Yeah.
so that you can't communicate and call in airstrikes on their position. If you take out the RTO, then you, in essence, just cut the communications off and you stand a greater chance of
But
overwhelming.
it also had some good things to go along with it. One reason I went ahead and took it, whatever. But of course, you was part of the time you was up there and part of the time you rear, that helped. But we get our supplies in every 2 or 3 days or whatever, and the RTOs took care of dividing them up. Well, the lieutenant said, "You make sure you take and procure me and you." And so we always had plenty of cigarettes, candy, or something like that. Everybody got something. We can make sure of that. But we had first pick of it, and that was one to go with that. So that helped out.
So when you were out in the bush, you had to drink water
Water.
right out of the streams and so on, didn't you?
Streams. Sometimes they ship it out and you get fresh water poured in a canteen, but you run out of that, and sometimes you had to drink out of the streams the best you could find.
Now, did you have the little white pills like
Yes.
we had when I was in, and you would shake it in the
Shake it in.
canteen until it stopped rattling?
Yeah.
And then you knew your water was purified. However,
It didn't taste that good, but it was water.
it was water, it was purified. However, it did not take the Agent Orange out of it, which
No.
leached into the soil, which is another story that we'll have to touch on at some point in the future for our Vietnam veterans in particular. So what type of weapons did you carry while you were over there?
Well, started out the M16, packed that a while. Then I got the M79, right?
The grenade launcher, sure.
Grenade launchers. Done that. Then when I took over RTO, I took back, I had my M16.
I'm familiar with a lot of the Army weapons due to the fact I was in Air Force Security Police, and we had to guard the nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of the same weapons that the Army carried, the M60 machine gun, the grenade launchers. Ours was a 203 instead of an M79, but I know exactly what you're talking about on that. Did you perhaps carry the 45?
Yeah, when I was at RTO, or with the rocket pedal, them things, I carried that. That's what you took, because you didn't have anything up. You had to have something to protect you there.
And when I was in, we were still carrying the old 45s too.
Yeah.
Carried on board aircraft.
Yeah. Very venerable pistol. Still around.
If you got little wrists like mine, it's well, I couldn't hit that wall over there with it. Hardly. The recoil on it was too much for me to even hardly handle it. I was a pretty good marksman with a rifle, but that pistol, I
See, I
wouldn't
was
hurt
just the
you with
opposite.
that.
I did well with a pistol, couldn't do very well with a rifle. But being a dog handler, got a dog in your left hand. Did you have any dog handlers with you? I know we did
Yeah,
supply
a few
the
times
infantry.
we had a few
Yeah.
dog handlers, but they treat them dogs better than they treat us GIs. They get up there, and I've seen lots of times there are different times, it'd be so hot over there, and they get hot, and they'd send a chopper out to pick him up, but they send us on. We could stand it, the dog couldn't see. And that didn't go too good.
Well, I came up with a question. I asked the first sergeant why I had to qualify with the M60 being a dog handler. First sergeant's always got an answer for something. No, bang, your dog's dead. Now I need you on that 60. Roger that, first sergeant.
They gave me a 45. On the crew, they gave us all 45s to carry in a shoulder holster. And the advice was, if you bail out, the German civilians will kill you. The German soldiers will capture you and put you POW. So you use your own judgment of when you're going to use that 45. And you were probably about the same way. Did you do all the contacting on helicopters coming in and out and hauling?
Some.
You did all the contacting.
So we had, each platoon had a radio.
Yeah. See, I was a radio operator too, and I was the only kid on the plane that could send Morse code. I was 19 years old, $300,000 plane with 10 men, and I was the only guy that could communicate. So how old were you when you were doing this?
I guess I was 20, whatever.
Yeah.
My brother, he's 8 years older than I am. He retired from the Navy, and he was a master chief. And he flew on the helicopters over Vietnam. He'd done 3 tours in Vietnam. He was there with the Gulf of Tonkin thing in '67, and then he returned for 2 full tours over. And he flew on these flights going in and out to help people like Jack out there and stuff, a lot of it. And
Pretty interesting, a hot LZ.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
The tales of some of those helicopter pilots,
yeah.
you know, we just had Paul, help me out here, Miller, Paul Miller,
yeah.
who was 100 years old and died here recently, but his son Felix, you know, he flew those helicopters over there. and
But
stuff.
we interviewed Hodges. Hodges passed away, but we interviewed him when we were doing World War II. We did a few Vietnam people.
We
And
always enjoyed the
fantastic stories.
helicopters coming in. Of course, it was hot, but you get up there and you could cool down. And that was, that's one of the benefits. But also, you was a pretty good object up there to hit too, so it went both ways. Or they bringing food in, supplies, every 2 or 3 days, and that helped out.
Yeah.
The thing about, he's talking about the RTO. Now we have global positioning systems. You don't have to worry about it. Back then, you had to put it on a map right down to an 8-digit grid coordinates where that helicopter was going to come in. It's a little bit more difficult than it is today. So you had to know the maps on top of everything else, didn't you?
Of course, the commander, the lieutenant, you'd have done all that, but I could do it, if I had to.
And that's why you were trained to do it. If the lieutenant goes down, then somebody's got to do it.
But see, I wasn't trained in school or anything. I took field training. I picked it up.
Well, you can learn more because the lieutenant mentors you right down to the fine points of it.
Yeah.
Jack, you realize that if it had cell phones, they wouldn't have needed us.
But one thing about they seen that radio, know, that lieutenant or captain, whoever was around there too, and use a dead object, you know, whatever. They looked out for that, and you used to get both of you.
Oh, yeah.
You could even be in the bush and had antennas
Yeah.
whipping up there, giving you away.
Yeah.
So you were definitely a target, without question.
It's amazing how, with the technology that we had back then, that we were as able as we were to be able to identify targets and stuff real well. Although we weren't looking for enemy in Vietnam, but similar tactics to find any submarines and things up and down the coast and stuff. And most of us that have seen any of the new technology and stuff just blown away by it. You know, I even we had a meeting in our group here last year, and Lee come out and spoke to us, and I brought along. We had I sat in a real tight quarters. The space between the consoles on each side of me on the jump seat between the pilot and the co-pilot was very narrow, and the helmets that the Navy used for flight crew was a rather bulky helmet, and the advisors on and everything stuff, so it took quite a bit of space up. And when I would be on board that aircraft, I mean, just looking sideways, doing the things I had to do, I was always banging my head on the crazy side of consoles and stuff. But that was where my communication was at, was inside that helmet, my earphones and stuff. So one day I was up in the flight ops and parachute loft up there. I went up and I said, we got any headphones or, you know, things that might be a little easier to use in his helmet? And they said, oh, there's a bunch of stuff, old stuff from way back over there. Go look through it, see if there's anything over there you want. So I went over and I found, and I showed them to you. I brought them. I've still got them. They had a World War II set of earphones, the old leather caps and adjustable dude, and a black mic that was just like you see on the movies, the bomber crews and stuff. There were black mic that they were using for communication. It was all sitting there. And I said, I wonder if that thing would work. And so I took it, and I said, I'm going to take these out. They're junk and everything. So I took it and plugged it in my airplane, and it worked just fine. So I used those the whole time I was in there. Boy, it made it wonderful. I could move my head around, do things in that aircraft that I couldn't do with that helmet and stuff. But it was a throwback to Lee's time. I mean, he would have used exactly the same thing I was using. Pretty neat.
Jackie, when you were in Vietnam, did you notice any transition? Because you said you joined in '68, and in April of '69, you deployed to Vietnam. There was a change in leadership at the top at that time. I recall when I was in, we transitioned from President Carter to President Reagan, and there was a difference between night and day, and you were in when Nixon transitioned into being president. Did you notice any difference at that
I never
time?
noticed any real difference outside of maybe you heard more talk about Nixon wanting to get it over with. He done more than what Johnson was doing.
Right.
He poured it to him, and he wanted to end the war. And that's what you mean, you heard whatever.
Okay.
Nixon winning was a positive on our end. We thought maybe there was a chance of getting this over. So it was definitely a little bit of a transition. And another thing too, of course, with him being Army, but I was in the Navy, and my A school was in Memphis, Tennessee, at Millington down there, just north side of Memphis. And '68 was not a good time to be a military guy in Memphis, Tennessee, because you had Martin Luther King just got, and it was not particularly good at that time. And they cautioned us about being around town and stuff, you know, we had to be careful. But the turmoil politically and climate that was going on, and then of course Robert F. Kennedy got shot and killed and stuff, you know, and there was so many things that, and then the war was not popular. No. I mean, the people home were weary of burying their kids and stuff, and you can't blame them and stuff on that part. But the media and everything was very anti-Vietnam, and the political climate was just not very good. And it was more, well, let's get this thing out of our way. But for the guys like Jack that was over there on the ground, I mean, it wasn't any different there. I mean, their life went on fighting just like, and it was just a really odd time, But as members of the military, I can't honestly say that I experienced a whole lot of difficulty with that. By and large, I mean, our groups really didn't spend much time talking about it or anything else. We had jobs to do, and we pretty much, when we was off time, it was go time to get an oldie and drink beer and do things we used to do, and my mom wouldn't have been real proud of me, but I did, but those were things that occupied our time, and it wasn't we didn't have the social media and everything telling you everything going on. You didn't have CNN and Fox News broadcasting 24 hours a day about everything going on. So we didn't know a whole lot about what was going on.
You had NBC, CBS, and ABC. That was it.
Yeah.
Well,
Cronkite saying that's the way it is, So.
Right. But on another note, I want to thank the Vietnam veterans, because the treatment that the veterans receive today, I believe, is a direct result of you fellas saying you're not going to treat the younger veterans the way we were treated. When they come home, we're going to respect them. And I want to commend the Vietnam veterans for that, because it's obvious who stood up for us as younger veterans to get that situation changed.
When you come back and you're draft dodgers out there and hollering and everything, I couldn't go that route.
Good thing we come from a rural county. We really didn't have to put up with that too much here in Lawrence County. Maybe somewhat north of us, but that's for another discussion.
This is more out like Oakland, the places you're getting off at, coming back
Yeah, where
into.
you was traveling through was where the worst part.
No, they wasn't that much around here, no.
See, you had the disadvantage. In World War II, we were all heroes, and everybody supported us, and no matter where we went, people wanted to buy you coffee or a drink, and everybody was backing you, and it was just a completely different war than Korea and Vietnam, and that's it.
One place we got off was called baby killers.
Yeah,
That really makes you feel.
yeah, that's what made it so bad. It was that you had these people protesting against the war.
We were discouraged to appear military outside when we were off duty and stuff. I mean, they didn't want us back in your time. I mean, a lot of your guys, you wore military uniforms and stuff out in the public all the time.
Yeah,
and
well,
stuff,
we were heroes.
Yeah,
Ones that lived were heroes, and we come home and everybody treats you like a hero.
They told us
There was no opposition
dress
to
down,
World War
don't
II.
look like you're military, because you might not run into real
I was
enjoyable situations.
I was real lucky. I had big families on both sides of my dad and mom's, had a lot of neighbors and friends. And when I come back, they just all kind of took me under the shoulders,
Yeah.
and, they helped me along, and that's what brought me out of it so quick. Now, a lot of veterans come back like that, they didn't have that, and it hurt them.
We've got a member in our group, I won't name him, but he wrote several pages of just his recollections of things, and he was in some of the worst of things you can't imagine. And I've got a copy of it and stuff, and I'll give it to you. Jackie didn't open up much about things for a long time, and many of them are that way. And this fella, he's very backward about speaking. He writes it out, but he doesn't want to speak much and stuff. And so I don't know if you'd ever get him to do an interview or not, but he had some of the most harrowing situations you can imagine, and the mental hurt that was a result of some of that stuff is he's 75 years old now, and I mean he's still living that, and it's things you just don't get over sometimes.
Well, you have my number. If you talk to him and get him to give me a call, we'd be happy to have him on. Right, Lee?
Sure.
We have a hard time getting him to come to meetings.
Yeah, that's the thing of it is his memories are too vivid, and he just can't. He has to keep it suppressed, and he gets excited. I think I know who you're talking about, but he can't stand the thought of it. Memories he doesn't want. He doesn't want memories.
Right. Yeah, it was a time. I'm thankful. I mean, my aircraft was too large to. We didn't fly off a ship, so I never spent any time on ship in the Navy. And the aircraft that, when my aircraft was decommissioned, we transitioned into the new P-3 Orion. It was a large aircraft too and stuff. And so neither one of those aircraft were suited to much military use in fighting. And so I was always away from that. But I had many crewmen that worked with me that had flown other types of aircraft and stuff, and had been very much exposed to many things, and helicopters especially. And always was entertained when the training going on out in San Diego, or flight training and stuff, for the Marines was training out there with their helicopters too at the same time, and we would sit out there and just be amazed, because they'd be flying around and their training they'd kill the power on the helicopter, and they would simulate a auto gyration to be able to bring that thing down with a controlled crash, basically with an engine failure. They could feather the props and the thing would drop like a rock, and then just before they'd hit the ground, and they would crank the props back in and let the wind turn them enough that it would slow the descent. Now, they didn't go all the way down in training, obviously, and stuff, but I mean, it was amazing. And I said, I wouldn't do that for nothing. And so I always thought, well, flying on an airplane was a lot better than flying those helicopters, that's for sure.
Well, it goes back to your training. All your NCOs would tell you, we need to train like we're going to fight. And that's exactly what was going on. They were training like they were going to fight. That's why a lot of veterans have hearing issues. You train like you fight. When you go to the range,
Oh, I can't hear well at all.
no hearing protection. Back in the day that I was
When I
in,
got hurt, it busted my eardrum here, and it grows back, but I still have time hearing out of it.
We were encouraged to wear ear protection a lot around the aircraft and stuff, but we didn't usually wear them. I mean, we just didn't. You'd see, nowadays, you see crews walk around aircraft, and they all got their ears on and stuff like that. And when I was messing around NASCAR the last several years with Chase Briscoe, we'd always wear our ears around the hot rod engines and stuff, because it's very noisy and stuff. But, back when I was 20 years old and 21 and stuff, I mean, you just never thought about it. And they were more cumbersome than they were good, and so you just didn't wear them. And listening, you had jet engines around you all the time, and those are the ones that really take your hearing out. The high pitch is what's really tough on your ears and stuff. The drone of a reciprocating engine is really not that bad, but those jet engines, boy, that whistling engine, I tell you, that's tough on your ears. And we didn't protect ourselves very well with that.
We didn't wear hearing aids or anything, because, we couldn't keep them in,
you can't call a timeout to put in your hearing protection when they come across the wire. You just can't. And being around B-52 bombers, those things have 8 engines.
The thing about flying in a helicopter and stuff, when I first got there, I didn't want to ride around in it much. I got in the middle, I got in the middle, because I didn't want to sit on the sides or anything. But it wasn't too long then, I was one of the veterans, and you got in last and you sat on the side there because you got to cool off. Mm-hmm. But you also, when you went down, you was first one out. You might save it where the other guy's jumping out. So that just, you learn from experience there and what has to be done, what don't. Then you pick out what you can do and do it.
Lee, do you have any more questions for them?
No, I was just thinking, how old were you, Steve, when you went in?
19.
19. See, I always said teenagers won. All my books, I say teenagers won World War II.
Sure.
They drafted us at 18, and we weren't legitimate adults until 21.
Very true.
And so the Army and Navy, the armed services picked up all these kids who couldn't buy a beer or drive a car, and really weren't adults. But we went in, and almost a third more suddenly were in
We always
there.
talking out there.
There wasn't any question when you guys went in. You just went in. You were adults.
We ain't old enough to drink, but we're old enough to shoot a gun.
Yeah.
That's what we talked about.
I said a while ago, my brother, he was in the Navy, retired, but he was 8 years older than me. And when I graduated in May of '67 from being at Bedford High School, the next day, I was on a Greyhound bus heading to Seattle, Washington, where I caught a Alaskan Airlines Super Constellation, the old Super Connies, and flew up to Kodiak, Alaska. And I spent the summer up there with my brother on base over there, and I worked at Kodiak Motors Ford in Kodiak, Alaska. We sold Fords, but we also sold Volkswagens. They were those little rear-engine air-cooled engines was good for the climate up there to get around in and stuff. And so I was on base around aircraft and stuff. The Blue Angels even come up there that summer while I was there and stuff. It was pretty neat. But by the time I was 19 years old, getting ready to go in the military, I'd already traveled a lot. The auto dealership, Pal Deckard Ford, that I worked for when I was in high school, sent me with John Hall and another guy that was a policeman here down to Mendenhall, Mississippi, down by New Orleans, to retrieve a car that had been stolen from the car lot. And they went down to retrieve the juvenile that had stolen it. And here I am, 16 years old, and they dropped me off at the impound place to take the car, and I head back to Bedford by myself, 16 years old. And but back then, 16, 17, 18-year-old kids, we did pretty much anything. There really wasn't much fear of it, and we just do whatever needed to be done and stuff. Well, you wouldn't even think about sending a 16-year-old off to do something like that these days and stuff, So I think that a 19-year-old kid from my generation, I'm sure in your generation, was a bit more ready to do things
No, well,
than we were.
I'm gonna tell you just the opposite. I was still in high school when they drafted me, and they wouldn't let me finish. And I was as green as grass. The farthest I'd been from home was Indianapolis to the 1943 basketball championship. Suddenly I found myself in Amarillo, Texas, 1,000 miles from home, with a bunch of other high school kids. Yeah. I mean, it was a completely different world. We were I couldn't even drive a car. We didn't have a car, Depression days. So it was a completely different world back then than it was when you guys got in.
Yeah, really, we may very well had an advantage over you at that point too.
Yeah.
But yeah, many of the people that I was in boot camp with come from every walk of life and every race, and we had guys that was too heavy when we started and guys that was too skinny like I was when we started, and by the time we was done, we were all about the same. And the big guys got smaller and the small guys got bigger,
Mess hall was my favorite place. I
weighed 110 pounds when I went in. I weighed 158 when I got out. And I growed 3 inches taller.
Yeah.
And
The mess sergeant would tell the people passing out the food, give that guy another scoop of potatoes. That's the way it went for a skinny guy like me. I weighed 133 when I went in. Yeah, give that guy another scoop of potatoes.
You meet all kinds of people like that, but where I've been there a couple, 3 months or something, like a couple months, I guess, and got some more come in there in Vietnam. Williams was his last name, but he's a colored guy, and he's from Atlanta down there. Now he come in, and he's just a little different than all the other colored people was. You can tell that. We got along great, everybody with and everything. And then he was the type of guy, if you was down, he could get you laughing or feeling better or something or other. But we called him Bubbles. And the reason we called him Bubbles, we was talking about one of his kids and stuff like. Said, my mammy, he said, my mammy gave me a $20 bill once and sent me to the store to get me some bubble gum. And he said, I did. When I got home, I got a spanking. And we asked him, how come you got a spanking? He said, I bought the whole box. But he was that kind of a guy that, you meet all type in there and everything. And I'd like to meet him again, but I'm afraid to asked. I know where he made fire or not yet.
We, yeah, I mean, I've got a good friend still up in North Platte, Nebraska, that he and I went and, we, boot camped together, and we were in A school together in Memphis, and we got shipped back to San Diego for, our flight training, and he ended up going into the S2, aircraft, which was, they used them for a cod aircraft to take the mail in and out, back and out to the carriers and stuff and things. And the S2s were used a lot over in Vietnam. And when Bill Haddock, he ended up going to Vietnam with the S2s. And several years after we was out, I drove up through North Platte and stopped seeing him, and he was a railroad engineer. And he done okay, done well with his life. And I've been in touch with a few of the ones that I was in with, but we were from all over the country. I mean, it was a very diverse group of people. And I had one, got time, I'll tell you this one little story. It's a neat story. I did have a black guy on my crew. And I can honestly say that I don't know that I ever seen a bit of racism in my group of people I was ever around. I mean, we were all comrades, buddies. I mean, and so I never seen any of that at all. And I never seen any of the smoking pot and all this kind of drugging and stuff that they used to talk about, a lot of guys involved in. I never seen any of that stuff at all. We just didn't do that. Drank a lot of beer, but that was about as much, as I got. But the thing about it was that this young man, we got extra pay for flying, hazardous duty pay. And he was married and had a child, and it was critical for him to that extra money was really needed for him because he had a family there that lived out there with him at San Diego. And but he was scared to death of flying. I mean, absolutely petrified flying. And we would only schedule him with the very minimum amount of hours that it required a month so that he could get paid. And we knew he didn't like it. And the safest place on the aircraft to fly and the least stressful was to put him in the aft station back in the back of the airplane. And basically all they needed to do, because I had other guys that knew how to work the sonobuoys and did all that stuff and everything, all he had to do was sit in a seat back there, and whenever we would get off the ground, we would shut the jet engines off, didn't need them anymore. And when those jet engines would die, they would dump a bunch, whatever jet fuel was still in the engine would be dumped out. You needed to get rid of it because you didn't want a hot start whenever you'd fire it back up later on. And so his job was, whenever we'd get off the ground, I would ask for an aft station report, and his report would tell me that the dump on the starboard engine's complete and the sails and wings all look good, and he'd say this dump on the port wings engine's good and everything's over there. That's all he has to do. And one night we were flying in the evening, and we got up and and he also had to monitor the start of the motors. When we would land, we had to fire them back up because you had to have them online just in case if you had to wave off and go around, you'd need the power, extra power from those jets. And so before we would get into our final, we'd fire up the jets. And again, he was to watch out his window and make sure that the engine fired up properly and everything was clean and coming out. Well, one night, we was coming in San Diego, and it was pretty dark, and everything was normal, and I asked the aft station to give me a report on engine startup. Silence. I mean, absolute silence. I called 3 times, and he never responded. And that night, he was the only one. We had just a bare crew, and he was the only one sitting back there. So I took my gear off, and I jumped across the wing spar and slid back into the aft station to find out what in the world's going on back there. And I get back there, and it's like daylight back there. we had about a 50-foot plume of smoke or fire coming out of the back of that starboard motor because it had hot started on us. And it scared him so bad that he was just petrified. And I used to say he was as white as we are, but that's probably an exaggeration. But I mean, that boy was absolutely scared to death. And I grabbed the mic and called up there, told him shut that engine back down, a hot start and stuff. And it was really dangerous because that dude, if that had caught the engine completely on fire, we'd have been in trouble. And so when we landed, and I told him, I said, you know, you can't fly no more, right? And so we lost the crew, and he lost his flight pay. I hated that for him, but I said, man, we just can't have this no more.
Can't stand that.
Yeah.
Yeah, our every B-17 crew, the pilot made sure, the smart pilots made sure that nobody was a drunkard and that everybody was ready to fly and no horsing around. He was very serious about it. Because in a crew like that, everybody has to do his job to limit or put everybody in danger.
Exactly.
I want to ask Jack one more question. Did you see the nurses, the guys that went, the medics? Did the medic go fly with you guys, or did they make special trips?
No, they'd fly with us.
They flew with you,
Right with us.
unarmed medics with a helmet.
Well, some of them would have a pistol on maybe, but most of them was unarmed, yeah.
Each platoon had a medic assigned to it
Well,
at that time?
usually each company had one, but
Each
usually
company?
each platoon. 3 platoons in there had one. And they was always good, you know, pretty well. They wasn't too many of them that was smart alecks or anything like that. They just all treated you good and had pretty good training.
I always admired those guys that went along with you guys and didn't have a gun with them.
Yeah.
But they had to drag the wounded out and take them out, especially evacuations and all that.
Now,
It's a whole different war from
when
mine.
I got hit, it knocked me out, that RPG.
Yeah.
Of course, it hit here and there. I woke up, they had me buckled to the helicopter, not in the helicopter. I was on the Bumblebee helicopter, and they had me down there on the where it lands, buckled to it. You know?
Like the MASH.
Yeah, and of course I woke up and couldn't see that a little bit, and then seen that blood, and of course I didn't know what to do up there. Nobody tell me anything, so I just shut my eyes, you know, prayed to the good Lord. And when I woke up, I was in the base in the bed, you know, whatever. So, but
But some medic came out and got you.
yeah, sure did.
Yeah, the old show MASH, you know, was pretty realistic.
Yeah.
And those guys, they flew them out on those stretchers, loaded on the skids on the side of the helicopters and stuff. And because it wasn't a very big helicopter, it was a very tiny helicopter.
Well, usually had just a regular Huey, you know, out there, but they get so busy, and there was 7 of us hit when they got hit us, and it killed one guy. But they had to send out the Bumblebees out there to help out.
Yeah,
That's
that
3
that
knives
small
on that.
Bell helicopter, it was a small, just had that globe
Yeah, I remember
face
that.
on it, you know.
They didn't have
stuff.
no room for you in there if they fast you on the.
Yeah, just like
Yeah, they
mine.
just had a plexiglass bubble around the pilot. That was it.
Not very big aircraft.
And Steve mentioned starboard and port. For those of you who don't realize, that's military jargon for left and right. Starboard is right, port is left. The way I always remembered it is port is 4 letters, left is 4 letters, and then just the opposite for starboard. So is anything else, Lee?
No, I think I was just glad to do that. Fill in for my own information. Yeah, I've interviewed several Vietnam vets, and they've told some.
I would say
Fantastic
one thing
stories.
about our group. We started to talk about it a while ago. Many of the members of our group were boots on the ground, and such as Jack, and we got a lot of guys that had some real experiences for sure. Some of us never spent time on the ground and never was involved in the fighting. We supported whatever we did and stuff for the war effort, but totally different perspective on the war, I think. But it really came home to me, though, and in January 1970, I get a letter from my mom informing me that one of my childhood buddies had been killed over there a couple weeks before that, Mark Bundy. And Mark and I were childhood buddies. And all of a sudden, wow, you know, the whole thing, it was quite an impact on me. And I was just practically destroyed over that. I just really couldn't believe. And we knew people were getting killed over there and stuff, but boy, all of a sudden that one come home on me. And so we've got this group that's been organized now for several years. We meet on the first Monday of each month. We take off November through February, but then we do March through November for our meetings. We've got a group of people where people like Jackie, who probably didn't have anybody really to relate to and talk about much and stuff, we can do that with each other, and I think it's good for the guys to be able to do that. We raise some money and we do things together, and we give a couple of scholarships, one out at BNL, one down at Mitchell. It's getting hard. Our criteria for those scholarships was hoping that the kid would have some family member, might have some identification with Vietnam, maybe be a Vietnam vet and stuff. That's getting a little bit tough now, but still, we've got a good group that we're trying to keep the memory alive on some of these things that I think are important. And we intend to this Memorial Day coming up to kind of spearhead that Memorial Day thing. And maybe this year with the so-called 50th anniversary, I think for most people, 74 was really kind of the end of the war, but officially it came to end in May of 75. And so Memorial Day this year, hopefully we'll have kind of a memorial that'll also have some information about the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War. And so many of you will be involved in that to see that happens. And
You have a memorial down on Lady Freeman here on the Freedom. Did you put that in, or did somebody put that in for you?
that what?
Your memorial down on the courthouse lawn.
Oh, the Vietnam Veteran
Yeah. Memorial?
Those things came about without any input from any of us. I can't honestly tell you who all was involved in it. I'm thankful that it did. We've got World War II, World War I, we've got Korea, Vietnam. We've even got some Gulf information there, but I think those major conflicts are all represented there on the square, and it's neat. But we're going to try again to have a good ceremony this year, and hopefully we can get a good turnout and do it upright. But we'll kind of be our last hurrah, I guess you might say, for the Vietnam vets. Anyway, 50 years is a long time, and it's just like you. I mean, Lee probably going to live at 150. I don't see any way around it. He's going to be at least that old before he goes and everything, because we need him. And
I doubt it very much. The way I feel today, I doubt it very much.
But we probably average about 75 years old in our group and stuff. So we're just youngsters compared to him.
Yeah, we need a parade to honor the whole group. And then a bunch of you can ride on the trucks or whatever, and just kind of make it See, when we first come home from World War II, we'd have big parades in uniforms.
Yeah.
And everybody took part and everybody was proud, And so now we need to do it. Maybe we need to do it again for you guys and everybody who followed you. I mean,
May have to ride a truck or something, though.
yeah.
We actually, every year we have a little trailer and a little float and some information and pictures and stuff on there for the Persimmon Festival down in Mitchell.
Yeah.
And it's pretty gratifying. You ride on the trailer, and by and large, the crowd is it's supportive of us old Vietnam guys sitting on there, getting pulling through town and stuff. So small town Indiana, it's pretty gratifying to get recognized and stuff. But again, I think most of us are over that. we're all proud of who we are and what we did and stuff, and I'd do it again. I'm proud to be an American, and this is, I think, what 1% of our population serves, and so we're kind of unique in that.
I'd point out one thing to you. The 7th of May is considered by the VA to be the official day that the Vietnam War ended. And the 8th of May is VE Day, Victory in Europe, from World War II. That's something you guys get together with the World War II guys and the Vietnam guys and come up with a date there, and we can have a gathering.
Well, we can include all veterans as far as that goes, because we know nothing of what happened since Vietnam. This is all big secret, and everybody can't talk about that. You bring somebody in and interview him, I can't talk about that. I said, why'd you come in here if you can talk about it? You know, you guys talked. You told the story.
We do now.
And that's a very good
When
story.
I first got out, we didn't. I mean,
Yeah, it took me forever to get him to come to the meeting
Yeah.
and join up. And you know, and I'm saying stuff about Jack, he don't know, but his daughter, Lori, come up to me last weekend. We had a birthday party, and she came up and she said, "I just want to thank you for getting my dad out."
Yeah.
You know, so we offer an opportunity for people
It
to
helps,
come join
to
us.
talk about it.
And I tell you what, some of these youngsters saw stuff in Afghanistan and Iraq and things like that. That I tell you what, they're not exempt of this problem.
No,
And,
we don't know what they did because it's all a big secret. So we're going to interview everybody.
Exactly.
We're going to start with you guys and interview everybody up, bring them up.
I got one more little story if you got time, whatever. But after I got out of service and everything, got my family and raised him up and everything. But one of the girls dated a guy from Crawfordsville up in there. And through college or something they met. Well, they got married and they down there and he's going through my yearbooks and stuff and seen my Army yearbook and got to looking at it and everything. And he said, a Benji. I said, what? He said, there's some Benjis come where I was at up there. I said, you're kidding me. And we went going over there. I was in basic training. His name Benj, B-E. My name Bartlett, because anything we done, we learned how to do it together. And went through basic, ended up going through AIT out in Fort Lewis, Washington together, and got the same orders cut. And there's a bunch of them got orders to go to Vietnam. And our name wasn't on it. We said, boy, we're going to Germany, stateside or something. About 2 days later, our orders come out. We was going to Vietnam, but we was going through Oakland, California, where these guys were going to Fort Lewis. We got travel pay, and they didn't. But that's what I'm saying, close. We was together ever since we got in the first day. Well, over one day, and he was in another platoon, and snipers hit it. And they come back through there with him. I said, who is it? He said, Benji. And of course, that got me pretty low. Didn't do it. So when I got out, I wanted to find out where's that. So I went up there to Crawfordsville, met the family, and met where he's buried and stuff and everything. But so just memories like that, they just don't leave you, you know. How two guys get together like that, and then his neighbor pert near married my daughter, you know, from up Crawfordsville. How things fall together. So the good Lord has a lot to do with me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I sure thank him for it.
Mark Bundy, George Good,
Yeah.
Bobby Schofield. These are all guys that I knew.
Lanny
real well.
Norman.
And, you know, so
Bobby
you'll
Schofield.
never forget those guys.
Yeah, that was my grandmother's next door neighbor, so I knew him when I was a young fellow before he ever went to Vietnam.
Well, we thank you. We thank you.
Yeah.
Well, Lee, I think that's about it. We're
Yeah,
running out of
that's
time.
been very good session, very good initial session. We're going to keep this up, but you guys can promote it for us.
Behind the camera, we have Joe Voris. Thank you for being here,
you,
Joe.
Joe.
Really appreciate that.
Thanks, Joe.
Jackie
Joe.
and Steve, thank you for your service to our country.
Thank you.
Lee, thank you for being a good co-host again.
One of these days you'll get to see yourself on something.
And on behalf of the Lawrence County Museum and Historical Society, I'm Brad Bough, the Vice President. I'm also the Veteran Service Officer for here in Lawrence County. I want to thank you all for tuning in. And as always, if you love your freedom, be sure to thank a veteran.
That's right.
So long, everyone. We'll see you next time.
So long.